Hi, I'm Alexis, a full-time artist here in New York City, and I am currently working my way through The Artist's Way, week by week sharing my honest thoughts and reflections. If you have not yet seen weeks 1 through 3, I would recommend going back and giving those a watch, just so you have a better understanding of where we're at in this journey. And if you're new to this channel, welcome. I typically share my art and inspiration and activism and just life here in the city and thoughts on what it means to be a human during such a time as this. Week 4 in The Artist's Way is all about recovering a sense of integrity. And in the first half of my life, when I was a teacher, we did a lot of work as a school community around character and character building, and integrity was a huge part of this. But the framing that was often used in that setting was the integrity of yourself as it related to others, right? So I choose to do what is right even when it's hard or no one is watching, right? So how do your actions impact the community? What I really, really loved about Julia Cameron's framing of integrity in week 4 is it's all about the self. And it's all about having integrity with yourself and being true to who you are for the betterment of you as an individual. What I really loved was the unpacking of integrity as it relates to living in your fullest authenticity. And true to who Julia Cameron is, she purports that the biggest tool to accessing this integrity or authenticity is through the morning pages. She says it's through the morning pages that we will access these breakthroughs, because through the morning pages we are working on a journey of self-discovery. And she warns us that it is often in these moments right before that breakthrough, right before we experience a strong emotion as it relates to self-discovery, whether it be good or bad, we'll be tempted to abandon the practice of our morning pages altogether to avoid that strong emotion. Because perhaps we as humans like to avoid strong emotion, but she encourages us not to. And she actually says it's in these moments that our persistence is most important. And to be honest, when I first started the reading for week 4, I was really perplexed. I found it really curious that she just started week 4 right off the bat talking about how important morning pages are. Because I was like, Julia, we've already established this. And you have done a really good job of driving that point home over the course of the past 3 weeks, especially in weeks 1 and 2. So why come back to it and dedicate nearly an entire chapter to this practice? And then it has me wondering, is week 4 a common point of tension within this work, where many people begin to experience a breakthrough and then will abandon it? Because I don't know if you've done this practice yet, but I know that in last week's video, I shared just how impactful I found week 3 to be. And so I am really curious if this is the point in which many of us will start to experience those breakthroughs and where that discomfort begins to grow. That discomfort in that old life, right? She kept saying that we would be angry because we know how dissatisfied we are with the old and how desperate we are for the new. But in order for the new to come, we have to be willing to let go of the old. And anytime there is a change in direction or a release, strong emotions are sure to arise. Julia Cameron then quotes Chekhov as saying, if you want to work on your art, you have to work on your life. And says that in order to have a creative expression, we have to have a self-expression, and therefore we must learn how to self-express. And I don't know about you, but that is something that I have had to really work on, that self-expression, knowing or believing or trusting that I have something worth saying, something worth sharing that hasn't already been said 1,000 times, that there might be some sort of value that I can add. I had to break through that because I think that was one of the largest blocks holding me back from stepping into this creative identity. And she says that in stepping into that creative identity and stepping into that power of self-expression, we will lose and we will also gain. She says as we learn more and we become more aligned with who it is that we are supposed to be, And this is where it gets a little woo-woo for me, but like I've said, I can get down with the woo-woo. As you step into that higher version of yourself, there will be things that you have to let go of. The habits and the practices and the beliefs in who you were that are no longer aligned with where you're headed, you will have to shed all of that because there's no space for that in where you're headed. So you lose perhaps a vast part of yourself and what you stood firm on in the past, so that you can then gain this new identity and this new way of thinking and being and interacting with the world around you. And there's so much of this that resonated that I have seen play out in my life. In lockdown, when I was taken out of that grind, I lost a 2-hour commute and impromptu meetings and just so many things that took so much of my mental capacity throughout the course of every day. And then finding myself in this apartment, and I am not in any way minimizing how horrific the pandemic has been for so many and for our communities, but I will say that removal from the grind then allowed me to take a deep look at the life that I was leading and where I actually wanted to go. I had more time for myself. I had more time to really think about and to dream about and to envision what the world could be and what I wanted my role in that building of that world to be. As I disentangled myself from capitalism and from my identity within capitalistic structures, I regained a sense of my full humanity, and I stepped more fully into myself than I had been able to in so many years. And I began to understand that the life that I had built for myself, this career that I had pursued for nearly 2 decades, no longer served where I wanted to go. And it would no longer enable for me to build the life that I wanted for myself in whatever amount of life I still had left in front of me. And so I made the very difficult decision to leave that career and to trust myself and to trust my body and to step into a path that I hoped would allow for this fullness of existence to unfold. Not just an existence that was centered solely around my job. And Julia warns us that as we step into these transitions, as we reckon with who we were and who we want to be, strong emotions will come up, and oh boy did they ever. I've been on this journey of coming home to myself for damn near 5 years, and perhaps it will be a journey that I am on for the remainder of my life. A constant growing and shifting and realigning, a constant release so that fullness may enter. And it's not been easy. It's been a journey filled with immense grief. Grief deeper than I ever perceived possible. But in that grief, there has also been tremendous hope. A hope for what's possible, a hope for what's to come. And I fully believe that these two emotions can coexist. There's a deep grief of releasing who I thought I was. This whole life that I had envisioned for myself, built on a path that others had laid out before me. And now there's this hope of forging my own path and building my own journey forward, one that is true to who I am, free of the expectations of others, and one that truly honors perhaps what it is that I'm supposed to be doing in this one life that I have. But what I do know is that by releasing what was no longer meant for me, I have been able to step more fully into my humanity. And what I know is that I am no longer willing to sacrifice those deepest parts of myself for what the world deems as appropriate. And I am more steadfast in my integrity to myself. Julia then introduces this idea of Kriya, and I'll be honest, I looked it up because words, like I mentioned in week 1, are really important to me. And I learned that in Sanskrit, Kriya means an action. And I also saw it referred to as like a life energy force. So in kind of melding those two ideas together, and based on how Julia Cameron kind of explains it to be, my understanding is that a Kriya is like an action that must be taken in order for your soul to thrive. And Julia says that in life we have Kriya, so we have these actions that we are supposed to take in order to best thrive. and that if we resist, if we refuse to take these actions, we will become sick. And y'all, when I tell you, I knew that it was time to leave my job, but I stayed because I was terrified of the unknown. I knew in the deepest part of myself that it was time to go, but I stayed. And do you know what happened? My career ended when I had a stroke. Months before that event, and I know it sounds dramatic, and I'm not dramatic, I swear, but I had told my friend and supervisor that I felt as if my body was dying. I couldn't explain it, but I had, like, deep down, man, I felt like I was dying, that there was something terribly, terribly wrong. This was a Kriya. This was an action I had to take. Otherwise, I became ill. And when I took too long to take that action, illness is exactly what happened. Why do we hold on to things for so long? Why are we willing to sacrifice so much of ourselves before we're willing to take the action that is necessary to step more fully into ourselves? Are we really that terrified of change? I know I was terrified to leave without a backup plan, but here we are, 2 years later, and I would not go back for anything. I really love this idea of a Kriya, an action we must take for the deepest parts of ourselves to thrive. Have you ever just known you were supposed to do something without there being like a rational explanation for it? I have. It's how I ended up in New York City. And there is a significant understanding of myself that I have become who I am because I have had the opportunity to be in community with the communities that I have been a part of here in New York City. And so in order for me to become this fullest version of myself, in order to create the work that I create, I had to live in New York City. So moving to New York was a Kriya. Quitting teaching was a Kriya. And stepping into art again at 40, after nearly 3 decades away, that's a Kriya. And in all of these instances, there was a deep knowing, one I could not explain, that these things were necessary for the deepest good of myself, so that I could become who it is that I am meant to be for myself and for the collective. Julia refers to the Kriyas in like how they're used in 12-step programs. She keeps coming back to addiction support, which I find to be really interesting. Because maybe we're addicted to our old selves, and stepping into the new can be terrifying. I don't know. She refers to them as like a release, a letting go. And she consistently insists that your morning pages, that stream of consciousness, will reveal your Kriyas to you. It will reveal what you need to release in order to step into your fullest existence. And they will help us to work through our vagueness and to get really, really clear about who it is that we are and what we want, and within that, what we will create. And she says that, your morning pages are this practice in solitude, and that it is in solitude that we will reconnect with our deepest self. She has this line that I really, really love. Until we experience the freedom of solitude, we may be enmeshed, but not encountered. And I don't know about you, but I am ready to encounter. I want to know the deepest parts of myself. I really want to I really hope that in this life, that in this creative journey, I can experience who it is that I am to the fullest. And it's when we are in those moments of encounter, if you will, when we get down into the heart of who we are, to the source of our being, she says that's where our creativity will flow from, and that's where our originality will come from. And once again, I saw this play out in my life. I had no idea that this journey that I have been on for the past 2 years, just through meditation and self-reflection, would be so strongly supported by the practice in Julia Cameron's The Artist Way. And so I don't know if I have a head start, but I do wonder if I could have been able to like get through it a little bit faster if I had had some sort of like direction to go in, because I've just kind of been floundering for the past 2 years by myself trying to figure out where the hell it is that I want to go. But what I will say is that once I stepped out of that capitalist grind and the expectations of others, and I sat with who it was that I had been and who it was that I wanted to be, I was able to get very, very clear about who it is that I want to be and where my values lie and the work that I want to create and the future that I envision that is based on creativity, but also compassion and liberation, and what role I have in bringing that forth and what role my art will play in bringing that forth. And when I started my art practice, I started making portraits of people in my community that I found inspiring. And then I think I do what most people who start with portraits do, where then you go on to like well-known figures. And that was rewarding because, I mentioned that I really wanted to practice hair. So I did, Black History Month and the Women's History Month. And that was tremendous practice, but it left me feeling void of any true like impact. And so there was like a year and a half there in my practice where I'd be laying in bed at night talking with my husband and just being like, there's got to be something more, because I don't want this to just be it. And in my solitude and in my ability to really deeply reflect and understanding what it is that I hope to be a part of, my community scenes were born. And my Great Creating collection also came forth from that time. And so the two parts of my practice that are the most significant to me are absolutely founded on the values that I hold and the vision that I have for our collective future. And I don't know if I would have gotten there if I hadn't been able to spend that time in self-reflection. And I think that's where the morning pages come in, because it's a built-in time for that self-reflection that may otherwise feel a little counterintuitive if you're constantly like trying to make the most of every moment and making the most of every moment in a way that feeds capitalism, right? But when you disconnect from that and you reconnect with your deepest self, I think that's where the magic lies. And I think that is where the origin of your creativity exists. And I think that's where you begin to create something that can truly have an impact. And she says that, as you step into this new version of yourself, that false sense of identity that you were sustaining falls away. It's no longer important to you, and it must be released. And I definitely experienced that when I stepped out of teaching. When I left, all of the big emotions, like she says, you'll experience. But I also then, she says there's a great purge that will happen. And I went through this apartment. We have like 500 square feet. It's small. When I tell you, I pulled everything out. And anything that had to do with that past version of who I was, that teacher version, the clothing, the books, the knickknacks, all of it went to mutual aid and then shared with the community, because I hoped that it would reach the hands of others who could use it, because it was no longer useful to me. I knew from that moment forward that there was no turning back. I would never be who I once was, and that I was fully stepping into this new identity. And even though I did not yet know, and I still don't fully know who it is that I will become, there's now space for that to evolve, and now there's more space for me to grow into who it is that I am becoming through this process, through this journey, through this creating. And I think it ties back to what she was saying last week in chapter 3 about how, if you have this belief in this greater power or energy or being or whatever it might be, you become this like active participant. And I do think that there is like a moment of stepping into your power so that you can then build the life that you want, because you've released what no longer serves. And I am in this process of action. I'm in this period of action. And I think that you have to go through all of this like releasing and grief and purging before you can get to this moment of action, because you have to fully let go of that old version of yourself so that you have the space to dream of who it is that you want to become and then act to make it happen. And man, I don't know if it will be such a long process for everyone. I know for me, it was a 2-year process. And I know that it was probably prolonged because of the stroke. I mean, that really, that took me out so bad. And I really do think because I stayed far longer than I should have, that like rebuilding process took much longer than it would have if I had just left when I knew it was time to go. I'm ready to build. And I think that once you get to that period of breakthrough and you understand what it is, like what this life that you want to build is, then you can get busy building it. I think that's the kriya, right? That action that you have to take in order for that deepest part of your soul to thrive. And that's where I am in this moment of time. There's so much more that she says in this chapter, and I plan on saying so much more, but I really just kind of want to leave it there. I think that this is long enough, and I really appreciated reading this chapter because what left me so shocked to where I was like gasping out loud was that, you know, when I was going through this rebuilding process, I felt so alone. I felt like I was so alone, and I wasn't sure, and I wasn't so precious about it that I didn't believe that anyone else would have experienced this. I just don't know anyone else who has experienced this to the degree that I have. And I really just I thrive in community, and I wanted to know that others have also experienced something like this. And if you have, my heart breaks for you as it broke for me. But man, am I so hopeful for you as I am hopeful for me. It was just absolutely mind-boggling to read the words on these pages that so accurately reflected the experience that I had had, knowing that they were written decades ago, and finding comfort in knowing that what I am experiencing, that if you are lucky enough to be able to reconnect with yourself and to find your creativity and to maybe encounter your truest self, I was heartened to learn that it's a universal experience. And if you have experienced anything like this, I would love for you to let me know in the comments, or if I shared anything that you found interesting or helpful, I would also love to hear it. So please don't be shy. Let me know in the comments. But this week, you know, the reading really hit me kind of hard just because it was such an accurate representation of everything that I've experienced, specifically over the last 2 years. And it left me feeling really empowered to stay the course and to take the action needed so that I can reach that fullest, most thriving version of my life, because y'all, I am ready for a win. So in week 4, I continued with my morning pages. I think that there was one day where I completely forgot to do my morning pages. But I think that there are going to be some days like that where you just forget, just because, you know, you hit the ground running and you've got so many things to do. So I did forget once, and I kept it up on all the other days, and I still really am appreciating having that space to just kind of get your thoughts out and kind of make sense of the day so that I can make the most of my day. And this week she assigns us to do a reading deprivation, and she insists that we must do this. And it's just don't read for a week. And that's supposed to like eliminate distractions so that you can like have all of this free time for your creativity. And I was thinking about how this was definitely written before the advent of social media and what have you. So I'll be honest, I did not read this week. But then, you know, we still have social media, we still have television, we still have like all these other forms of media that can take us out of our moment. And I really want to do some experimenting and try like a week without television and a week without podcasts and a week without social media, and just see how that helps to shape, like, I don't know, my thoughts throughout the day, my focus, my inspiration. I know that there are periods when I am like really busy, like the holidays are a big one where I'm just like booked solid 7 days a week, right? And it's just like go, 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 knock this out, ornaments, commissions, what have you, that my brain doesn't have a moment to process anything until I lay down. And the moment my head hits the pillow, whew, man, she starts going. And I definitely know from having those seasons of life how important it is to just have some quiet time and like time to not do anything. And so that's when I go for like a walk or I sit in a park, but I really just try to like eliminate any distractions so that my brain can do what she does to keep me moving forward. So I find it to be a really interesting challenge, one that I'm really into, and I am curious about modernizing the challenge. And so if I decide to, or when I decide to work through weeks such as that, I'll maybe make a little YouTube like, here's a week without social media and this is what I learned, you know, I don't know, but perhaps more to come on that later. And almost all of her tasks this week really centered around this idea of like purging and envisioning and thinking about the life that you want. So like one of the tasks was, imagine you're 80 and you're writing a letter to your current self. What would you say to yourself? And that one made me a little emotional because I hope to make it to 80. But I think it also made me emotional because I think it's so easy to get bogged down and stressed out in periods of rebuilding when you're really not sure how it's going to play out. But then thinking about like, well, hell, if I make it to 80, so much is possible. And so it really helped me like envision what's possible and to really grow a sense of hopefulness around this journey. And I just really appreciated this week's tasks as they related to kind of envisioning yourself in this version of your life that would be like the dream for you. And if you've been following along at all on this journey, you know in week 1 I was like really not into it. I was like really not into it in a way that I like put the book down over 4 years before I finally was like, all right, let's see what this is all about. And after week 3, I was like, oh, all right. And now here we are in week 4, and I'm like, you know, I love to be proven wrong. I also really love to be right. But I am being proven wrong, and I am beginning to see the value in this work. And so if you, like me, were highly skeptical about this, I would encourage you to give it a try, because it really has had me encouraged and hopeful and just really contemplative. But I think I want to say the same thing I said in week 3. In week 3, I was like, I don't know how she tops it. And here we are in week 4, and I'm like, I don't know how she's going to top it in week 5. And I don't know if this is supposed to be like a personal, private practice and reflection. I share all of this in hopes that maybe somebody will find it inspiring or helpful. And I think that there is power in knowing that you're not alone. And so that's the goal in doing this process with you all on such a public platform, right? Knowing that we aren't alone and that there are some experiences that are universal. So if you have made it this far in the video, I want to thank you for sticking around and for being here. And if you found this video helpful or enjoyable at all, I would really appreciate a thumbs up. That helps YouTube know that there's value here, and they're more likely to share it with others who might also find value. And we have a very small and growing community that I am just so grateful for. And if you would like to join us as I continue with the Artist's Way, but also share my life here in the city and my art, I would be truly honored if you subscribed. Every subscription helps these small, very new channels like mine grow. And I really really look forward to the day where we have like a large, thriving community where we're having deep conversations and encouraging one another along the way. But I think that wraps up this week, and I just want to thank you for being here and say that whatever time of day you've watched this, I hope it's been a kind one. Until next time.